Few stars in Hollywood have risen as fast or as forcefully as Russell Crowe. From the blood-soaked arenas of Gladiator to the brilliance of A Beautiful Mind, he seemed unstoppable, the kind of actor who defined an era. But for Crowe, fame was never a comfortable fit. Over time, he stepped away from the spotlight, retreating into a quieter life. Still, behind that calm retreat is a more complicated reality, a career that has lost its way, decisions that have left even friends puzzled, and a personal life marked more by isolation than joy. Now, with talk of a comeback beginning to surface, one question lingers. Is the Russell Crowe the world remembers still there, or has Hollywood already moved on without him? Russell Crowe's rocky road to fame. Russell Crowe was born on April 7, 1964, in Strathmore Park, a quiet suburb of Wellington, New Zealand. When he was just 4, his family packed up and moved to Sydney, Australia. By the age of 6, Crowe had already dipped his toes into acting, but it was a school trip a few years later that truly changed everything. During a visit to a TV studio, he stumbled into a surprise audition that earned him a role on the drama series The Young Doctors. His education carried him through Vaucluse Public School and Sydney Boys High before the family returned to New Zealand in 1978. At 16, determined to follow his passion, Crowe left school behind to pursue acting full-time. In the early 1980s, his career started not in film, but in music. Performing as Russ LaRock, he released singles like I Just Wanna Be Like Marlon Brando and Shattered Glass. Despite the effort, the songs failed to chart, though he even ran his own Auckland music venue, simply named The Venue. By his late teens, after appearances ranging from music videos to DJ work, he began shifting focus back to acting. Like many young actors, Crowe needed help in his early years. One of his closest friends, Naomi Watts, opened her home to him when he first tried breaking into Hollywood. Both were still unknowns at the time, and Crowe often crashed on her couch while chasing auditions in Los Angeles. In 1988, his professional acting career took off with a stage role in the Rocky Horror Picture Show where he played both Dr. Scott and Eddie. It was the perfect stage to combine music and acting, while throwing himself into the wild energy of live theater. His real breakthrough, though, came in 1992 with Romper Stomper. As Hando, the ruthless leader of a neo-Nazi gang, he gave a performance that was raw, disturbing, and unforgettable. To prepare, he read Mein Kampf, listened to Wagner, and pushed himself into dark mental spaces. The method was so convincing that police once mistook him and his castmates for real skinheads during filming. The role earned him the Australian Academy Award for Best Actor and established him as a rising force in cinema. Yet his range was already visible. In Proof, he played a gentle, observant friend to Hugo Weaving's blind character, a role that earned him a Best Supporting Actor award. Together, these performances showed both his ferocity and his tenderness, proving he could handle extremes with equal power. Hollywood, however, took time to figure out how to use him. Roles in films like The Quick and the Dead and Virtuosity didn't showcase his full ability. That changed with L.A. Confidential. As Bud White, a tough but vulnerable police officer, Crowe delivered the kind of performance that redefined his career. Surrounded by strong co-stars, he brought a quiet intensity that made his character the emotional core of the film. The insider role that changed everything. In 1999, Russell Crowe delivered one of his most acclaimed performances in Michael Mann's The Insider. He played Jeffrey Wigand, the scientist who exposed the lies of the tobacco industry. Wigand was portrayed as sharp, conflicted, and courageous, a man constantly calculating his next move even under crushing pressure. What made the performance remarkable was the way Crowe's intelligence shone through, allowing him to hold his own against Al Pacino, who played 60 Minutes producer Lowell Bergman. Despite being 25 years younger, Crowe came across as Bergman's equal. His transformation was more than the weight gain and makeup. It was his ability to embody a man driven by principle and burdened by consequence. That same year, Crowe made headlines for very different reasons. A bar fight at the Plantation Hotel in Coffs Harbour was caught on video and briefly became a media storm. Two men were charged with trying to blackmail him over the tape, though the case was later thrown out. Not long after, Crowe stepped into the role that would change his life, Maximus in Ridley Scott's Gladiator. The film's $100 million budget came with enormous expectations, and Crowe was asked to carry much of it on his back. The challenge was made even tougher by a shaky script that was unfinished when filming began. At one point, Crowe admitted he considered walking away. What kept him grounded was his partnership with Ridley Scott. The director reassured him that nothing would be filmed unless Crowe fully believed in it, and together they slowly shaped the story into something workable. The improvisations that followed became part of Gladiator's legend. Russell Crowe himself penned sections of Maximus's dialogue, including that heartfelt memory of his farm in Spain, an idea drawn straight from his own home in Australia. Even the now iconic phrase, "strength and honor," came from Crowe, who adapted it from his school's Latin motto. But his confidence, often veering into arrogance, spilled off-screen. Accounts from the set tell of fierce arguments with co-star Oliver Reed and tense clashes with the crew. Producer Branko Lustig even considered walking away after a late-night call where Crowe reportedly threatened him over pay disputes for assistance. Ironically, one of the film's most celebrated lines, "I will have my vengeance in this life or the next," was a line Crowe originally dismissed as terrible. He also waved off script Dr. William Nicholson's contributions as garbage, convinced his own talent could make any line work. But despite the turbulence, Crowe's performance in Gladiator was extraordinary. On screen, he commanded attention, moving seamlessly between ferocious battle scenes and quiet moments of grief. His Maximus felt both larger than life and deeply human, a warrior who carried pain as heavily as his sword. Filming was grueling and at times genuinely dangerous. Crowe endured long days of combat scenes and even faced live tigers in the Colosseum sequence, standing only a few feet away from the predators as handlers struggled to control them. It was a risk that paid off, giving the film an intensity that computer effects could never capture. Gladiator became a worldwide sensation, and Crowe was suddenly one of Hollywood's biggest stars. But the fame came with strange consequences. He later revealed that after the film's success, he was allegedly targeted for kidnapping by Al-Qaeda in a campaign against high-profile Western entertainers. The FBI provided him with heavy security on subsequent film sets, though the details were never fully explained to him. For a time, he was trailed everywhere by bodyguards, a surreal reminder of how suddenly his life had changed. The scandal that stole the spotlight. The period between the filming of Gladiator in 1999 and its premiere in 2000 was a whirlwind for Russell Crowe. His career was soaring, and the anticipation for Gladiator was building fast. Around this time, he earned an Oscar nomination for The Insider, though he lost to Kevin Spacey for American Beauty. Off-screen, his wild reputation was also catching headlines. Stories of late-night partying filled gossip columns, and a bar fight in Australia even led to a messy blackmail case later on. Meanwhile, early buzz for Gladiator was electric. Ain't It Cool News, one of the most influential movie websites at the time, couldn't stop raving about the film after test screenings. One writer even asked if it was possible for a movie to rock this hard, declaring it kicked major ass. By the time Gladiator hit theaters in May 2000, it was a box office triumph, pulling in $35 million on opening weekend. While the film was breaking records, Crowe was in Ecuador shooting Proof of Life alongside Meg Ryan. The movie's script by Tony Gilroy was strong, but the production was pure chaos: mudslides, volcanic eruptions, and even political upheaval. Director Taylor Hackford's temper only added to the storm, with one shocking moment recorded where he slapped a young actress during filming. Crowe, by contrast, kept himself together, even renting a theater in Quito, so the crew could watch Gladiator and throwing an after-party in a nearby bar. Behind the scenes, however, Crowe and Ryan were growing close. Ryan, still married to Dennis Quaid, quickly found herself the subject of tabloid obsession. Friends said she was deeply infatuated with Crowe, and her close friend Carrie Fisher even joked about wanting to hear the details herself. The romance, however, overshadowed Proof of Life entirely. Gillian Flynn, then writing for Entertainment Weekly, summed it up best. The movie became less about its plot and more about the affair that had the tabloids in a frenzy. By the summer, the relationship went public. Photographers captured Crowe and Ryan holding hands after the Mission Impossible 2 premiere party, and the tabloids went into overdrive. Soon after, Ryan separated from Quaid, with their divorce finalized in 2001. Crowe and Ryan's romance burned bright but fast, with the pair spotted everywhere from California to Australia before things fizzled by the end of the year. Reports suggested Crowe wanted marriage and children, but Ryan, fresh out of a 9-year marriage and raising her son Jack, felt it was too much too soon. She later admitted the timing was impossible, saying the attention and gifts, even a puppy and a vintage Buick, were overwhelming. Others described it as a classic co-star fling, intense but destined to fade. When the breakup came, Crowe told the Melbourne Herald-Sun that Ryan was a beautiful and courageous woman, adding that while their partnership ended, their friendship did not. He explained that his heart belonged to his farm in Australia, while Ryan felt tied to her home in the States. Despite the split, both spoke warmly of one another. Over time, Ryan revealed that her marriage to Quaid had already been crumbling long before Crowe entered the picture. She shared that Quaid had been unfaithful during their marriage, and that the real story of their divorce was far more complicated than the tabloids portrayed. She later described being vilified as liberating, saying it freed her from caring about public approval. Quaid also opened up years later, admitting that Ryan's fame had made him feel invisible, something he struggled with throughout their marriage. For Ryan, the experience, though painful, became a turning point. She spoke candidly about growing from it, finding strength in the aftermath, and learning to accept herself. In the end, the scandal that once consumed headlines eventually faded, leaving both Ryan and Crowe to move forward with their lives. Russell Crowe, Hollywood's angriest star. In 2002, Russell Crowe found himself in damage control mode. Known for his fiery temper, he picked up the phone and apologized to BBC producer Malcolm Jarry after an ugly confrontation at the BAFTA ceremony. Crowe had backed Jarry against a wall, unleashed a verbal tirade, and even threatened his career in Hollywood. All because the BBC cut part of his acceptance speech from the broadcast. At first, it seemed like Crowe was angry over losing a Patrick Kavanagh poem he had recited, but he later clarified that what really stung was the cut of his heartfelt thanks to John Nash, the mathematician whose life inspired A Beautiful Mind. To make amends, Crowe even spoke with Jerry's 12-year-old son Oliver, who was being teased at school after the incident. The actor spent 15 minutes on the phone with the boy, trying to smooth things over. Still, many in Hollywood doubted the sincerity of his apology. With Oscar voting underway and big names like Julia Roberts and Kevin Spacey backing Denzel Washington for Best Actor, Crowe's chances of winning a second Oscar suddenly looked bleak. The troubles didn't stop there. Later that year, police questioned Crowe after a reported scuffle at Zuma, a London restaurant near Harrods. Witnesses claimed the fight involved Crowe and New Zealand businessman Eric Watson, and that actor Ross Kemp stepped in to break it up. The police closed the case quickly, confirming that no one was injured and no charges were filed. By then, Crowe's reputation for volatility had become tabloid gold. South Park even parodied him in an episode featuring a fake show called The Russell Crowe Show, where he was portrayed as constantly fighting round the world. In 2004, life imitated satire when Crowe got into a fight with his own bodyguard, Mark "Spud" Carroll, on the set of Cinderella Man. Crowe later explained in a letter that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. He thought Carroll was accusing him of inappropriate behavior while chatting with a female extra, when in fact, Carroll was only passing along how others might perceive it. Sensitive to gossip, Crowe admitted he lashed out at the messenger. The two men reconciled quickly, and Carroll even laughed off exaggerated reports, joking that they had done worse to each other playing touch football. But the most damaging blow to Crowe's image came in June 2005, when he was arrested in New York after throwing a telephone at a Mercer hotel clerk. The clerk, Nestor Estrada, claimed it struck him in the face when Crowe became frustrated over not being able to call his wife in Australia. Crowe later apologized publicly, pleaded guilty to assault, and settled a civil lawsuit. The plea deal kept him out of prison, but cemented his reputation as Hollywood's hothead. Reflecting on the incident, he admitted to Charlie Rose that it was the most shameful situation of his career, something that psychologically scarred him long after the headlines faded. Crowe also pointed out the irony of the situation, saying the media frenzy outside the courthouse was more violent than what had actually happened inside the hotel. He acknowledged that while he could try to brush it off as water off a duck's back, the truth was that the scandal left a permanent mark on him. Over the years, the label of Hollywood's bad boy stuck, fueled not just by past incidents, but by Crowe's own prickly interactions with the press. He once stormed out of a BBC radio interview after being accused of slipping into an Irish accent in Robin Hood, insisting the host had dead ears, if that's what he heard. Crowe has admitted to being overly sensitive and intuitive, saying he can tell from a handshake whether someone means him well or not. That sensitivity, he believes, is both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. In later interviews, he expressed frustration with how stories about him had been exaggerated into legend, with incidents he says never even happened, being repeated so often they became part of his folklore. Despite it all, Crowe has tried to find perspective. He acknowledged that everyone loses their temper at times, and that sometimes his sharp tongue caused more damage than his fists ever did. He maintained that he had never hit a photographer, as the tabloids claimed, but admitted he could cut people deeply with a single sentence. For Crowe, the battle has always been between his intensity as an actor and the way the world reacts when that same intensity spills over into real life. When divorce turned into a spectacle. Russell Crowe married Australian singer Danielle Spencer in 2003, but by 2012, the couple had separated. Years later, Crowe admitted in an interview on CBS This Morning that he still loved her. Speaking with Charlie Rose, he revealed how much pride he once took in wearing his wedding ring and how life without her left him feeling off balance. He even suggested the story wasn't finished, pointing out that the divorce hadn't been finalized and hinting at a possible reconciliation. Yet, despite that lingering hope, the marriage was ultimately beyond repair. But just as his marriage was winding down, another headline grabbed attention. In October 2016, Crowe was accused of a dramatic altercation with rapper Azealia Banks at a private gathering in his Beverly Hills hotel suite. According to multiple reports, things escalated after Banks began mocking Crowe's music and insulting guests. Witnesses claimed she threatened violence, even going so far as to say she would stab people in the throat and watch them bleed. At that point, she allegedly picked up a glass, which led Crowe to physically remove her from the room before hotel security escorted her out. Banks later painted a very different picture, accusing Crowe of racist slurs. choking her, spitting on her, and forcibly throwing her out. But several people present, including her own guest RZA, disputed her story and described her behavior that night as erratic. Crowe never addressed the allegations directly, but his social media the next morning told its own story. A calm update about an early bike ride along the beach, suggesting he was unfazed by the controversy. For many, the impression was that he had little to hide. Banks's reputation for volatility followed her into this episode. Around the same time, she had faced arrests for separate altercations in New York and Los Angeles. Reports later suggested she was the one who repeatedly used the racial slur during the hotel incident, not Crowe. By 2018, Crowe had found a way to turn personal upheaval into something cathartic. On April 7th, his birthday and what had once been his wedding anniversary, he staged an event in Sydney called The Art of Divorce. The auction was his idea of creating joy out of sadness, a symbolic way of moving forward from a painful chapter. Among the items sold were props, costumes, and personal belongings, including the now famous leather jockstrap from Cinderella Man, which fetched $7,000. In total, the sale brought in about $3.7 million. Crowe joked online afterward about his impressive earnings for what was essentially a 5-hour shift. But on a deeper level, he admitted it was a cleansing experience. 2 days later, on April 9th, he confirmed the end of his marriage. Addressing false tabloid rumors linking him to Australian radio host Fifi Box, Crowe dismissed the stories and announced that his divorce from Spencer had officially been finalized that very afternoon. It marked the end of one of the most personal and complicated chapters in his life, and true to form, he closed the matter with both honesty and humor. From Hollywood's peak to slowing down. After his Oscar-winning turn in Gladiator, Crowe went on to headline major films like A Beautiful Mind and Cinderella Man. But by 2019, it was clear that his career had slowed down. He wasn't appearing on screen nearly as often, and many began to wonder why. Part of the answer lies in the way Crowe approaches his craft. Those who have worked with him often describe him as a perfectionist, someone who wants to know every detail before the cameras start rolling. Director Curtis Hanson, who collaborated with him on LA Confidential, once described him as an actor of 1,000 questions. Crowe dissected every line, refusing to leave anything unexamined. While Hanson admitted this made him demanding, he also recognized the value in it. Not every director shares that patience, though, and some may have found Crowe's intensity more frustrating than inspiring. That intensity, combined with his off-screen controversies, began to shape his reputation. Crowe developed a label as difficult, and in Hollywood, that kind of reputation lingers. Add in his deliberate choice to spend more time in Australia rather than Los Angeles, and the roles that once came easily no longer seemed to land on his desk. It wasn't just a case of him stepping back, it was also the reality that his star power wasn't what it used to be. For studios, bankability matters. Even an actor as talented as Crowe has to prove he can still draw big audiences. Over the years, his films have pulled in less money, and at the same time, the critical acclaim that once followed him started to fade. Award season, once a familiar home for Crowe, has largely overlooked him in the past decade. That may have less to do with his abilities than with the projects he's chosen. Still, Crowe has never been one to chase roles just for the paycheck. He has always insisted that he could never fake sincerity, and that belief has guided his career. As he's grown older, he has become more selective, taking on projects that truly matter to him. If that means only appearing in 1 or 2 films a year, he's comfortable with that choice. In fact, directing gave him a new perspective. When he returned to Australia to direct The Water Diviner, Crowe realized he didn't want to spend the rest of his life chasing film sets around the world. His greatest ambition, he said, was always to make the people back home proud. Over time, that focus shifted even more toward family and personal life. Crowe has often admitted that even at the peak of his fame, his goal was never about staying in the spotlight. It was simply to finish the work and then head home. Whether that meant retreating to the bush or spending time with his children, home was always his anchor. Russell Crowe's surprising new love story. Russell Crowe seems to have found the love of his life in Brittany Theriot, a New Orleans real estate agent who has quietly captured his heart. Their romance, which began publicly in late 2020, is already sparking talk of marriage. But this love story actually has its roots years earlier. The two first crossed paths on the set of the 2013 film Broken City, where Theriot had a small role, her only acting credit listed on IMDb. At that time, romance was the furthest thing from reality. When filming began in 2011, Crowe was still married to Danielle Spencer, though cracks in their marriage were already forming. By October 2012, just months before Broken City hit theaters, the couple announced their separation. For years after, it's unclear exactly how or when Russell and Brittany reconnected. Unlike some of the high-profile women Crowe had been linked to in the past, including Meg Ryan and Jodie Foster, Brittany didn't spend much time in Hollywood's spotlight. By 2017, she had left acting altogether and launched a successful real estate career in New Orleans. Then, in November 2020, the pair surprised everyone when they were spotted together on a tennis court. Their playful match turned heads, but it was a kiss shared on the sidelines that confirmed what many had suspected. The two were more than just friends. Crowe made things truly official in 2022. At the Rome premiere of his film Poker Face, he and Brittany walked the red carpet arm in arm. Dressed in sleek all-black, Russell couldn't take his eyes off her, while Brittany stood out in a bold, colorful dress with her hair styled in loose beach waves. The couple didn't indulge in heavy displays of affection, but Crowe's smiles and soft glances said it all. He was smitten. Since then, Theriot has remained mostly private. Her Instagram account is locked with just a modest number of followers, suggesting she prefers life outside the Hollywood spotlight, despite her connection to one of its biggest stars. For Crowe, that privacy and groundedness may have been exactly what he needed after the turbulence of divorce. In the years following his split from Spencer, Crowe lived the life of a bachelor, openly admitting to enjoying the freedom that came with it. He even joked about his dating adventures during a performance with his band, the Gentlemen Barbers, referencing the old saying about having a girl in every port. One of those adventures, in fact, ended with him being stood up in Paris by a much younger woman. At the time, it stung, but in hindsight, Crowe views it as a blessing. Now, that old disappointment has given way to something steadier, a real, lasting bond with Brittany. Reports say the Oscar winner has already picked out an engagement ring, and those close to him mention a noticeable shift. He's paying more attention to his health, his fitness, and the way he carries himself, all in an effort to keep pace with his younger partner. The Hollywood comeback no one expected. Away from the cameras, Crowe has mostly been living quietly in Australia, stepping back from Hollywood life. But insiders suggest that might soon change. Sources close to him say he has been reconnecting with old friends and colleagues, many of whom are encouraging him to return to the film industry in a bigger way. Just a few years ago, the idea of Crowe moving back to Los Angeles would have been unthinkable. He disliked the city and avoided it as much as possible. Now, however, he has mellowed. Part of that shift comes from his fiancée, Brittany Theriot. A former actress herself, she enjoys Los Angeles and would like to spend more time there. Friends say her influence, combined with Crowe's desire to make her happy, has played a role in his reconsidering a return to the U.S. Add to that the fact that several major projects are being offered to him by people he respects, and the idea of a Hollywood comeback no longer seems far-fetched. One name tied closely to these discussions is Ryan Gosling. Insiders describe Gosling as one of Crowe's strongest supporters. He has worked with nearly everyone in the industry over the past 2 decades, but he often mentions Crowe as one of the actors he admires most. Gosling has even been pushing for his friend to take on better projects, unhappy with some of the recent films Crowe has chosen, such as The Exorcism, Prize Fighter, The Life of Jem Belcher, and The Mummy. He reportedly wants to see Crowe back on solid ground, reminding audiences of the powerhouse who once starred in Gladiator, A Beautiful Mind, and Cinderella Man. With blockbuster action films still centered in the United States, Crowe's potential move back to Los Angeles, perhaps not in the heart of Hollywood but in the quieter suburbs, could be the first step toward a real career revival. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, comment, and turn on post notifications to stay updated with our latest content.